Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session. We all know that the Prime Minister is on tour for Indonesia and Australia. And in Indonesia, there was a very interesting moment where the Prambanan Temple was in the news, and the restoration of the Prambanan Temple, one of the biggest and the largest Hindu sanctuaries in the Java Indonesian sector itself, is now going to be restored by the joint effort of Indonesia and India. Now, this makes it relevant for the UPSC examination because you need to know the history, architecture, and how this temple represents a very interesting harmony of Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, before we begin, if you want the PPT of this session, you will find it in this Telegram channel. And if you have been meaning to join Unacademy, the 1999 offer using the code IAS English is live right now, and you can use this offer for 888 per month. You can become part of Unacademy. Now, let's talk about the temple. The Prambanan Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site itself, is a architectural marvel in a sector which had been influenced by what is called as Indo-Chinese culture, but specifically the Indo influence comes through the Hinduistic Shaivite community itself. And this temple is in itself a very important harmony of Javanese architecture, Hinduistic mythology, the Ramayana, and everything together. Now, what this temple actually represents is three cosmos. It has what is called as concentric squares, wherein the outer square represents the higher realms, then you have the inner realm, and then you have the core of the temple itself. So there are three realms which are actually represented in the ground plan itself. At the heart of it is the Trimurti and the most important Shiva temple itself. But the three Murtis are represented, which is Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. But the main temple is Shaivite Shiva. So remember that there's a symbolism to the ground plan of this temple itself, and it will now be restored by India. That is the context. This is the context which is in the Yogyakarta sector of Indonesia. The Prambanan Temple is now going to be restored by the joint effort of India and Indonesia. Now, we now need to understand two things. First, the history. Second, the architecture. Both become relevant for the examination. And because it is important that we take into account the soft power of India and the relevance of Hinduism in spreading the, you can say, diplomatic wings of India in this sector. Further, what is equally important is how does it represent a harmony of Javanese culture along with that Buddhism, along with that Hinduism is equally important. Now, when we talk about the history, there are two major dynasties involved. You don't have to go into the details which are given here, but you have to understand the two dynasties. One is called the Sanjaya dynasty, which represents the Hinduistic dynasty that ruled the what is called as Mataram kingdom in central Java. Shaivite Hindus in that regard. And vis-a-vis that, you have the Shailendra dynasty. Shailendra dynasty we study as part of UPSC, as part of the Cholas, and even when we talk about the sphere of influence of the Cholas itself, Sri Vijaya, Shailendra are talked about, but the Sanjaya dynasty is not talked about. Now, Shailendra dynasty is actually a Buddhist royal house. So now you have a Buddhist and a Hinduistic dynasty. Now, under the Shailendra, Javanese architecture and Java generally dominated the Buddhist iconography, or was the expression was Buddhist iconography. That is why between 700 to 900 CE, the architecture, the art, the technology, and even the mythology and the religion which flourished and was dominating was Buddhism. However, that did not mean that the Hinduistic Shaivite community was extinct. It did keep its mythology and its understanding intact. Now, the turning point where actually Prambanan Temple was commissioned is when there's a marriage between the Shailendra dynasty and the Sanjaya dynasty, wherein Raika Pikanta of Sanjaya dynasty married a Shailendra dynasty's last ruler's daughter, which is Pramodavardhani. When Pramodavardhani married Raikei Paikatan of Sanjaya. So therefore, Shailendra marrying the what we call as Sanjaya dynasty. It is in this moment that the wife and the husband commissioned the Prambanan Temple itself. So it is in itself a representation of marriage. However, because this Sanjaya dynasty was resurrecting itself, this temple actually represents a return of the Hinduistic Sanjaya dynasty over a century of domination of the Shailendra dynasty. And therefore, the grandness of this temple comes from this moment that the Hinduistic temples are back, the Hinduistic iconography is back, Sanjaya dynasty is back. I'll give you a summary of all of this, don't worry. And we believe that this was constructed based on inscriptional evidence in 856 CE. Now, after that, there is an eastward movement, which is there's a political shift of power towards East Java, and there were multiple earthquakes, plus there was Mount Merapi volcano which also erupted. These three things together led to the abandonment of this sector, Central Java, and also the temple complex became obscure. There have been several phases of restoration of the Prambanan Temple, but Second World War, Indonesian freedom struggle, the Dutch colonialism itself, all did not allow it to be actually be done in one go itself. So the first attempt was made in 1918 and the last major attempt was completed in 1953. The inauguration ceremony of the first restoration, which happened in 1953 itself, was by the first president of Indonesia. So therefore, it has a very rich history. Now, the second aspect which is equally important for you is architecture. When we talk about architecture, it has a Buddhist stupa-like element married with temple architecture. And the way the whole temple itself looks like, it looks like how previously stupas were made. One big stupa in the middle, then smaller stupas around the aspect of realms. But what you need to know is how are the different elements represented? What are the different aspects represented? For example, at the heart of the temple is the Hindu Trinity, which is Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, which is Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, together in the middle. Biggest temple in the middle is of Lord Shiva. And what is interesting about this temple is the linga is not there. It is not based on lingic worship. There's a statue of Lord Shiva. Then on the opposite side, you have the three temples dedicated to the animals who serve them. And on each of the projecting sides of the temple are stairways with separate chambers, and we have the statue of Shiva there. In the western chamber is Lord Ganesha. Then you have in the northern chamber the famous statue of Durga as Mahishasur-Mardini, and that is what makes this temple so, you can say, rich, because it has the Shakti, it has Shaivite culture, it has what we call as Vaishnavite culture. It brings all of Bhagavatism together, Bhagavatism plus Shakti together in its representation. So basically, if you look at the temple itself, it has this Shikhara itself with Amlaka and Kalash in its own representation, which is called as the Vajra. Garbhagriha is there, but in the middle you have the Shiva statue, eastern western chamber as we were talking about. But this way of representing is not new. You will see it in Angkor Wat also. This is called the Mount Meru type representation. But you have what is called as Panchyatan, which is multiple, you can say, Garbhagrias. Along with that, you also have clusterization, which is they're brought together. So main temple with multiple, you can say, Uri Shikhars is quite interesting. Now, the masonry technique which is used is called as the Javanese interlocking stone joints without mortar concept. The UNESCO tag is given in 1991, and in 1998 it is designated as National Cultural Property under the Indonesian property law. Now, what do you have to remember here? Because there's a lot of information here. So, first you obviously have to understand the Sanjaya dynasty, then how it represented Hinduism, then you should know about the Shailendra dynasty, and how it represents Buddhism. And the marriage between these two dynasties is the moment in which the Prambanan Temple comes. You don't have to per se learn the names of the rulers, which is Raiki, Pikhatkan and Pramavod Vardhani. You don't have to remember this. You just have to remember that the Shailendras are involved, the Sanjaya dynasty is involved, and therefore it is at this point that the resurrection of Sanjaya is represented. The second thing which you should represent is how does it represent cosmos? The Shiva temple, Brahma and Vishnu, along with the three major, you can say, animals which represent them, and their subsidiary shrines in and around this whole concept. This is basically a very good example of Panchayatan, and therefore you should understand how there's a main Garbhagriha, Shikhar. This is Mount Meru design, which is very common in Southeast Asia itself, and UNESCO World Heritage Site has been given. If you can remember all of this, then you are sorted. This is what you have to learn for the examination. The restoration process has begun. It will remain in the news. I'll be back with any update if needed. But please, architecture, history, and context, all three should be totally clear. So I hope that this gives you context, and I hope that you will add this to your current affairs repository. Thank you. Take care.